Call to order the November 12th, 2024 meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. Jean, could you please call roll?
Here. Sean Kevelan.
Here.
John Simons.
Here.
Eitan Goldberg.
I'm here.
Peter Boynton.
Aye.
Chris Kasoris.
Here.
All right. Bond release, 104 Bonnie Lane, Patrick Gaffney, request for release of $4,000 performance bond associated with the December 2022 watershed special permit, which will allow for the construction of an in-ground pool, patio, and perimeter fence within the non-disturbance zone.
So the site is stabilized. The required engineered certification letter and as-built plan are included in your meeting packet. The Conservation Administrator has also visited the site, and she's prepared to recommend the closing out the order of conditions as well.
So nothing outstanding, Jean?
Nope.
All right. Can I get a motion to release remaining bond funds and interest for 104 Bonnie Lane?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, that's approved. Discussion item, 135 South Bradford Street, James Zimmer, request for a waiver of watershed special permit to allow for construction of a 14 by 4 by 16.5 kitchen addition and a 14.4 by 16.5 screen porch in the non-discharge zone of the watershed protection district. Property is located in the R1 zoning district. All right, Jean?
You may recall at the last meeting.
Come on up.
At the last meeting, the applicant requested a waiver of a watershed special permit. The project is located in the non-discharge zone, approximately 187 feet from a wetland. The proposed addition and screened porch are proposed to be installed on 5 piers, resulting in no change to topography, vegetation removal, and the house is on town sewer. All of those are criteria for you finding a waiver to be applicable if you do so. The site plan includes erosion control measures and a dry well that will capture and infiltrate the entire roof runoff, including the existing roof. At the board's request, John Borghese has reviewed and approved the stormwater management design, and I have prepared a draft decision for your consideration.
Okay. Hi.
Hi,
Could you just identify yourself, please?
I am James Zimmer.
All
the-
right.
The guilty party of that.
And of 135 South Bradford Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add? Not
Please?
looking for you, just giving you an option.
Please?
Okay, please. Well, that is officially noted for the record. The applicant has said please. All right. Any other board questions, comments? Get a motion to approve the request for a waiver of a watershed special permit.
Actually, I'm sorry, I have one comment.
Oh,
Is it, sorry,
ahead.
in the finding of fact?
Yes.
It says 7 concrete footings. Is it 7 or 5?
5 for the structure, and then if you see on the stairwell coming off of the deck
Oh.
in the back, there's
it.
2 holding up the platform on that stairwell.
Okay.
2 very low ones.
I'm good then.
Okay. So can we get a motion to approve the request for a waiver and adoption of the decision that Jean has drafted approving the waiver?
So moved.
We'll go moved.
Oh, okay, I'll move.
Motion
Yep.
made by Chris, or motion made by Sean. Chris, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You're welcome.
Thank you all very much.
All right. Okay, 315 Turnpike Street, Merrimack College, application for limited site plan review under Article 8, Part 3, site plan review, and Article 10, administration, Section 195, 10.7 of the North Andover zoning bylaw. Applicant proposes construction of a 19,205 gross square foot, 2-story building, lecture hall situated along Ahern Road, oriented in line with Sullivan Hall. The project will include utility infrastructure, stormwater management plan, associated landscaping. The site is located within the R3 zoning district. Jean, why don't you tell us where we're at, and then we'll hear from the applicant with new information.
Okay, so I summarized in the meeting packet a public comment that was received via voice message from Ray Ahern on Salem Street, suggesting that the building materials be modified to include brick ends and to continue the first floor material to the second floor, resulting in only 2 types of material. So he was somewhat agreeing with what the board had suggested. As far as stormwater review, as discussed at the last meeting, the drainage for the proposed development site flows to the town of Andover. The peer review is being administered through Andover as part of the stormwater bank. A response to the first peer review letter has been included in your packet. We have since received a second response from our peer reviewer since this report was written, so Jeff could speak to that. Essentially, everything's been closed out with the exception of 2 criteria that she's looking for a final response on. That being said, I did draft a decision for your consideration tonight if you choose to do so, and essentially put an alternative condition that no land disturbance until the stormwater review is fully administered and signed off on by the Andover's Conservation Commission. But again, you can weigh that once you hear the two open items.
So yeah, Jeff, just please make sure to highlight what those two items are.
And as a reminder, the decision needs to be filed in the clerk's office within 90 days of the application filing. That deadline date is December 23rd, so you do have a couple more meetings before that.
Okay. All right, turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Excellent. Great to see you all again. Thank you for having us tonight. Anthony Preston, Associate Vice President of Government External Affairs and Institutional Projects at Merrimack College. Next to me, I have Jeff Kotteritz of VHB. As Jean mentioned, we are back here tonight to provide some updates for the board on the stormwater peer review and also some changes we made to the exterior of the building. So, Jean, if you wanted to.
Do you want to start with
hit the next
presentation or peer review?
Well, the peer review's in the presentation.
Okay.
We hit on that, so we can just run through. So just as a quick reminder, who the team is here, Merrimack College is the owner, Trinet as the OPM, Procon Architect Construction Manager, Mark Johnson is legal counsel of VHB as civil engineer and landscape architect. And you're familiar with us, so we can move on. All right, and just as a reminder, this is the parcel of land where the proposed lecture hall resides. If you are looking from 114, it's to the right of Sullivan Hall. You can see it highlighted in the map here. The lecture hall is currently 2 stories, about 19,000 square feet, with 5 lecture-style classrooms and no offices. And that is just a brief summary of it here, but you can see the site plan and the site layout in a more zoomed-in fashion. And then just a very brief overview of the 2 items we wanted to talk with you guys tonight about. The first is, like I said, the changes that we've made to the exterior of the building. And the second is an update from the third-party stormwater peer review. So the first is we'll talk about the exterior changes that we made. So the exterior of the building has evolved a bit since we last met. We have continually looked at a few different options to see what is going to work best for the academic core and what is going to work best for the intentions of the look of the building. So it's a smaller item that we've changed on the front side of the building. But if you look above the 3 windows in the center, there is some traditional brickwork that's done above the building. That is to kind of soften the industrial look of the building, and we actually carry that onto the backside, which is where you see the most obvious change for the exterior. So before I get to the brick that we've expanded on the first floor, that traditional brickwork above the windows on the front side we've carried over to the left side of this building. And again, that's just to soften the industrial look and give it more of a sleeker, sophisticated feel. As I mentioned, the exterior has evolved as far as the materials go. What we talked a great deal about last meeting in our intentions is to have this building really be a bridge from the corner development to the academic core and our more the brick facade buildings. So we think that this complements our intentions really well, and I think based on your comments from last meeting, I think you guys would probably agree with that. We don't plan any more changes. We don't plan to have any more changes to the exterior of the building. This is where we've landed and are moving forward with it. So I definitely wanted to bring this as a point of order here tonight. And then I think after this is the aerial view and then some night renderings. And that's from the quad of the campus. And then the next is from Lot C, which, it's the 114 side. That's taken from Lot C, though. And then the next is update on the stormwater peer review.
Okay. Great. Good evening, Jeff Kotteritz from VHB. I'll hit on these quick, and the two items that Gene mentioned that are outstanding. The first bullet there is essentially performing some additional field testing to verify the infiltration rates and the seasonal high groundwater table. We performed a series of test pits and borings initially that the design was based off of. The peer reviewers just asked that we perform additional testing a little deeper where the infiltration system is performed, just to be absolutely sure that what we're accounting for in our design is accurate. So that field testing will occur, and we'll be reporting back to the peer reviewer and both towns with the results.
So can I ask a question about that, Gene?
Sure.
Gene and Jeff, so if we make that a condition that this has to be finished and signed off on, once they do it, they can send to the peer reviewer and she can sign off, and then we're all set. But what happens if they do the testing and it's above what you calculated? One, what option, like how do we get notified of that? And two, how would that change the design of the stormwater?
Yeah, depending on the results, when we were pretty conservative in the estimate, but
Let's just say it's something
otherwise,
really unusual and you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And I don't expect this, but
it would be a matter of resizing the system, with maybe making it a shallower profile but a little larger footprint. But either way, we would have to redesign the below grade storage system to make sure we were still meeting the same criteria we are now. So maybe that system gets a little bigger.
And would you think that? And I mean, I would think that would then have to come back to us as a minor modification.
From a procedural point of view, it's not completely clear to me why we are doing or being requested to approve something without the testing being done. What's the impediment? I mean, why are we doing it? We don't normally do that.
It's fairly common that prior to land disturbance, sometimes there's a structure there and they can't do test pits under the structure. So that happened at the Starbucks and Ethan Allen building when that came down. There isn't necessarily a structure, but.
No, and there was original testing done. They've asked that we essentially do a deeper test pit just to make sure that there's no fluctuation in the seasonal high groundwater table. We supplemented it with the deep boring information that did identify groundwater about 16 feet down with some conservative adjustments, so we're fairly confident we're good, but the peer reviewer has asked just to perform a second test to verify that
They did it for
calculation.
National Grid recently as well, in the basin itself. They have to do additional test bits, send the logs to me, and then the peer reviewer reviews them.
But if anything is a new material, large building, I still don't understand why you can't do that stuff first. And then after we get it, we approve it. I mean, how much time are we talking about here? A delay, when is this going to be done?
When the buildings, are you asking when the building's
Well,
complete?
no, this additional testing, like, are we talking about 2 weeks, a month, 6 months from now? When are we talking about this testing being done?
I think we're doing tomorrow.
Yeah, with it immediately.
They could do it right away.
7 a.m. tomorrow.
So why wouldn't we approve it without the testing being done? I mean, it just doesn't seem to me to be, I mean, I grant you in some cases there's a compelling reason to cut them some slack, but it doesn't seem to me that there's a reason to do that in this case.
Let's defer to the board, if that's what you'd like.
I will say we are trying to get ahead of the colder months when the ground is really hard. We would
Well,
like-
all to my point is if you're going to do it now, and then we'll wait and approve the thing when it's done. I mean,
Well, I guess I think the more pertinent question would be, if this is approved, are you doing any land disturbance before the winter, or is this starting with land disturbance in the spring?
winter.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the more pertinent question, right? If they weren't if they weren't.
Well,
going
that's a
into
little
spring.
bit what I'm trying to understand
Right.
is how tight a schedule are you doing this on? I mean, is this literally, I mean, I don't want to cause you problems, but I want to understand your process.
Yep.
If you said losing 2 weeks or 4 weeks is going to mess up our completion schedule, I'd say, okay, maybe.
Yeah.
But to this point, you haven't said that, so
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Yeah,
what your
I-
issue is.
From our end, we would like this building up operational and with occupancy January of next year. So we are in a tight schedule right now. Not to, regurgitate what you just said, but we are on a.
No, that's
a tight
fair.
schedule.
It's,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the context,
Yeah.
because
We-
I don't want to waive our overview unless there's a compelling reason to do it. That's my only point.
Okay, well, let's hear what the other one is. Maybe we can kind of do some sort of hybrid where if we do approve it, we still have it on our, I don't know, but we have to close the public hearing, so, I don't know if we can do that. Okay, let's continue and then we'll think about it.
Sure. So the other remaining item is the 3 bullets here are just notes on the response. Clarification was issued on the treatment units. The stormwater pollution prevention plan will be submitted 14 days prior. That was recommended as a condition. That document's been prepared and is just about finalized, so we'll be able to submit that shortly. The 4th bullet there was just a plan edit to the erosion control plan that's been made. So the 5th bullet there is the second open item Gene mentioned, and an operation maintenance plan has been prepared for this project and submitted with the documentation. The peer review request was to provide a campus-wide O&M plan, which we're in the process of pulling together, and we're looking to submit that prior to construction as well. We're in the process of just pulling that piece together for the campus as a whole and not just the lecture hall project as proposed.
So those are not the 2 open ones. So all these potentially could be conditioned. The O&M plan, they asked for a budget to be included in the O&M. We don't have that yet.
Correct.
So that was conditioned.
Correct.
So the other one was the depth of the basin. You projected it less than you have in the stormwater bank and prior projects. I could bring that up. So the 2 are 2A and 4A in the peer review letter. So 2A is about the detention basin flow monitoring. So the rainfall depth used was 3.4 inches, is larger than the depth used for this project at 3.17. So she asked you to use consistent methodology for all proposed projects within the college campus, including the lecture hall.
Correct. So one of those rainfall amounts is from the original 1999 stormwater plan. The other one is from the current NOAA Atlas. And yeah, we're happy to update that based on whichever she would approve as far as being
So all I'm saying is
consistent
that
with the
one has
monitoring.
not been addressed. That's not the same as the PowerPoint that listed things that you recommended conditioning. And the other one is 4A. So she requested a third-party review of the TSS.
Yes, we have that. There's certification. We have that letter in hand, and we'll be submitting that to Janet. There's third-party testing companies that have verified the removal rate. We're assuming less credit than the manufacturer's calculations, and we just need to provide our documentation of that. So we do have that in hand, and we'll be submitting that.
Okay, so where,
Can you remind me of the date of this letter?
Last week, November 7th.
thanks. So, because stormwater's been kind of a sensitive subject in the area, with the, again, I don't see this as, again, the runoff to Andover, but kind of each project we've done, we've touched on stormwater. I think we're better off just, it seems like it's more than actually two things. It's a couple of things, so a couple open items, a couple items that need to be, they seem pretty easy. So I'd say we should shoot for finalizing those things, get the final sign-offs, and then we can finish it on the 26th, which is 2 weeks from now. I think I'd be more comfortable with that, just where it's stormwater.
So if I understand correctly, planning board meets November 26th, but you don't meet with the Andover Conservation Commission until December 3rd. right?
Correct.
Yep.
That's okay. I mean, I think we can, if I think we can condition that they get any approvals from Andover that they need, that's fine.
After we get
Right,
Horsley Witten's,
right.
Oh,
After we
not
get
all
everything signed off on our end, we can at least condition that and not make you have to wait until you come back from Andover. Obviously, if they change anything or don't give you their approval, you may need to come back and get a minor modification anyway. So let's do it the 2 weeks, go there. Appreciate the changes to the architecture. I will admit it's probably a little harsh in my assessment last time, so I apologize for that. It was, again, it's not my favorite, but you know, that's your prerogative to make it how you see fit, and if you guys like this, then fantastic. Move on from there. Any other questions or comments, board members? Any other any comments from people and members of the public? Anything else that's come in other than the comment we already received?
no, point of clarification
Yep.
for me, so do you want them to conduct the additional test pits?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Do the test bits, respond to anything that's outstanding, tighten it all up, and get it ready. I think we should expect, in order to vote on it, I want everything tidied up except for approval from the Andover Conservation Commission, which we'll set as a condition. Gene, can we go back to those conditions that are potentially being suggested, though? Okay, so we'd like you to do the testing. You can do that now. That'd be great. Then we don't have to add it as a condition if you've already done it. Right, Gene?
Yep.
Okay, right. The O&M plan, that'll be a condition. You guys are already working on that. And anything of these other ones that are an issue?
No, the SWIP will be submitted prior
Okay.
as well, so that, no issue there. That'll definitely be provided.
Great. Okay, so it looks like we're in good shape. It looks like a nice project. I think we'll be ready. Anything in the draft decision that you guys had any issues with? No.
Not
Okay.
particularly.
If there is, let us know. It looks pretty solid to me. So let's tighten up the stormwater, and then we'll plan to vote on the 26th, and we'll go from there.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks all.
Fantastic.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay. 1250 Osgood Street, application for limited site plan review special permit and site plan review and parking special permit under Article 8 supplementary regulations, Article site plan review, Article 8, 195, 8.17, limited site plan review, Article 8.1, parking special permit, Article 10, administration. The applicant proposes raising of his existing building and related improvements and redevelopment of the property into a 2/3 story building of approximately 21,145 square feet. New building to be used for childcare facility and associated play areas, along with medical office uses and other uses as may be allowed under the zoning bylaw. Property is located in the I-2 zoning district. All right, Gene, it's been a little while since we've had this one in front of us, so if you could give us an update.
Yep, so you may recall that we peer reviewed this for civil, traffic, and stormwater. TEC conducted the civil and traffic, and their review is complete. However, the memo defers several comments to the board related to the curb radius, the lighting plan, access to the building, and a simple note on sheet 3. So I've gone over those comments with Attorney Smolak and asked to have those directly spoken to the board to get a sense as to whether you want them conditioned or not. The applicant responded to the second stormwater peer review, and just today or yesterday, we received the final sign-off on the stormwater. They have addressed all of those comments. The fire department has approved the swept path. But I think that's it.
Okay. Great. We'll hear from the applicant.
Were you gonna go through those comments or?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the members of the board, John Smolak, attorney for the applicant. With me is Steve Stupinski of Merrimack Engineering and Derek Roach of Vanessa and Associates. Just to add on, since we haven't been before the board since, August 13th, which was our introductory filing, our presentation, just to add on to what has been mentioned in the legal notice, in terms of the relief we're requesting is limited site plan review because 3/4 of the building, or about 15,000 square feet, is dedicated for a child care facility, and the balance of the square footage, 5,800 square feet, is dedicated for medical office or other use that might be allowed under the I-2 zoning district. And in addition, we've requested a parking special permit relief, not for the number of spaces, but simply in the event that we had to adjust some of the design standards, some of which we'll discuss this evening. So in addition to that, just by way of background, we were before the Board of Appeals twice. First time was back in May to request a front and side yard setback simply because we wanted to site the building in substantially the same location as the existing building there today. And then subsequently, we went back in October and actually September. And in October, we were able to obtain a variance for the sign that's to be located in front of the building. And again, that sign, which we'll discuss shortly, is a standing sign or a pylon sign that is, again, substantially in the same location as the sign that was previously there for the Hokkaido restaurant. And so, in addition to that, we are before the Conservation Commission again on December 3rd, I believe. And in addition, we'll be applying after local approvals have been hopefully obtained to MassDOT for access permit approval, and then we'll also be asking, since the location of the property is pretty close to the airport, we'll file our FAA and Mass DOT airspace review clearances as well. And so, with that said, I'd turn the discussion over to Steve in terms of addressing those stormwater comments or going through the changes. But I will say that since our initial filing, there have been no changes to the architectural design or the landscaping. And so a lot of the adjustments have been primarily driven by the stormwater.
In terms of the stormwater, we did some additional testing in the rear of the site and revised the site plan to add some additional catch basins that Horsley and Witten had recommended, and also revised the grading so that there was no runoff onto Route 125. That was essentially it in a nutshell. I think TEC in their recommendations had suggested that slope stabilization be revised and expanded upon, which we did, and also had some comments regarding parking, which the planning director went to the building inspector for a clarification on, and we revised the handicap spaces to accommodate the building inspector's comments. We had them compliant with ADA requirements, but the town of North Andover has a requirement that exceeds the ADA requirement. That's essentially it in a nutshell. In terms of the major changes on the plans, everything else is pretty much the same. I know TEC had made a recommendation that we increase the radiuses to 15 feet at the curb cuts, which we really can't do because Mass Highway and I think maybe with the apartments, they widen the roadway. So the town, you have a requirement, or I guess a requirement that says entranceways need a radius of 15 feet. You really can't do it in this case because the property line's only 4 or 5 feet from the edge of pavement. So where the building is located and the way the building is located on the site, we can't really fit in 15-foot radiuses. So
Well, what is it right now?
we have, right now, they're like 4-foot radiuses. And we're proposing making the curb cuts smaller. So we have a combination. We have, you can see on the plan, we got a radius of 8, and then a radius of 8, and then a radius of 10, and a radius of 10. So if the radiuses were 15, they'd be what I marked up in green. So there's no way we can actually comply with that and still get the aisle widths that we need. And we wouldn't be able to get the swings with the fire trucks as well. And we kept the entrances at the 15-foot maximum. You have to remember that normally on a right-of-way, you know, if you're coming in with a subdivision roadway or a driveway off a right-of-way, there's 8 or 10 feet between the layout line and the edge of pavement, so you can fit the 15-foot radius. But in this case, the Mass Highway widened it, or it got widened for the apartments that are next door. And when that happened, they put in radiuses that are like 4 feet, 3 feet, 5 feet.
So this is our zoning regulation, right? It requires
It's a planning
15
board,
feet.
it's not a zoning.
Planning board
It's-
rules and regulations.
Well, it's under parking. It's between 15 and 25 feet minimum maximum, which is adjustable by special permit. That's why in part why we filed the parking special permit application as a placeholder in case these circumstances came up. And so that's why we requested it. And also, this is primarily under MassDOT jurisdiction anyway. And so MassDOT is going to be the final arbiter of that.
Can I ask a totally dumb question? But it's the radius of what exactly?
The curb. Radius of the curb.
As you turn
The
in.
curb radius, the curve.
Okay.
Can you show us a diagram of the site?
So we could see
I-
where
I'm
this
just
curb
trying to
radius
figure
is?
out-
Back to my sketch, I marked it in green.
So you're saying the short radius is just narrower, right?
Yeah.
Gene, do you have
We have,
this?
we have, you know,
Okay, thank you.
compound curves so that the fire truck and the cars could make the turns.
But like which side is the street and which, I'm trying to figure out what this, like where's the building and where's the street?
Well, the street would be where the 21 is, for example, in the sketch. And the building would be where where Gina's got the pointer right there, yeah.
So to add on to what John's saying, essentially if you're in a 15-foot radius, you go into the building.
Yeah, right.
Right, is that
Right.
simplest,
That's-
clearest way?
Yeah, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
But why do we have it as 15 feet being the rule? I mean, obviously, I assume it's a safety issue. Do we have any rationale for why 15 feet and why we would adjust that? I mean, I get that you're saying that you might not be able to do it based on how you designed this, but it doesn't mean it's safe. So that's what I'm trying to get a hold of, is this.
So it's the curbs on both sides of these two entrance and
Looks
exits.
really narrow.
Well, if you were making a 15-line radius, basically like the green area would be much bigger, right? Is that effectively what you're saying? The
Green
curb would have to
area
stick-
would be
The green area
actually
is
smaller.
You'd have a wider.
The green area would be smaller in the front, because the radius would clip into that. But there's not enough room to be able to do it fully on the site.
Well,
because
that's
it
my
would,
point. If you, like right now, what you're showing is 4 or 5 feet.
no,
right?
I have one 15-foot radius, I have an 8-foot radius, I, have a compound curve, so that so like if you look at one entrance, I have a radius of 8 and a radius of 8. And then
Can
I
you
have
go
a
back to
radius
the
of
other one
10
and just
and a
tell us
radius
which
of
is which?
I'm sorry, what?
Like on this, tell us starting, on this side, work your way over, what are the radiuses? This is more a learning thing for me, believe it or not, because I'm missing it completely.
Okay, so if you look at the left entrance,
Yep.
the left entrance, which is the one closest to
And that's a split one, right?
Sunoco, yeah, closest to the gas station, right? So that has a radius of 8 and a radius of 8. And then on the right, it has a radius of 10 and a radius of 10.
And what do our regulations require? 15, 15, 15, 15?
15, 15, 15, 15.
Minimum 15,
Number
So
max
that-
25.
Number 3.
So that's on the left entrance. On the right entrance,
Well, 12 feet wide for one-way use and 20 feet wide for two-way use.
So those are drive
The
aisles.
minimum curb radius shall be 15 feet. The maximum width of the driveways shall be 25 feet.
right. We have to have the fire truck be able to swing as well, right? So,
And we've provided a swept path analysis that demonstrates
Right.
adequacy of
So
But
what is,
isn't,
but
isn't the reason that it will hit the
Why-
building is because of where you've sited the building?
no, the building is,
Couldn't the
Kinda
building
fixed.
be further away to allow for the
no, because we had to keep.
radius?
Had to keep that face because that's where the existing foundation is, the existing building. Well, we didn't do this to ourselves. This is something that, I don't want to say it, but this board, somebody approved apartments next door.
what does that have to do?
And when you approve the apartments north of the site, you approved a widening plan. And with the widening plan, you approved it with smaller radiuses into the site. So
Well,
if the roadway wasn't widened, we'd be able to,
How
you
do
got the road
apartments
here
affect this site?
and the property line here,
It's the next
we
one.
can make the 15-foot radius, no problem. When you added a lane and widened the road, you
But that
put in
doesn't,
radiuses.
that doesn't answer the question of why have you chosen to put the building exactly where you've chosen to put the building?
and let me just back up to your earlier point without forgetting John's question. The road was widened, but that was public, so you had access to that information that this road is now wider. So you knew that when you were drawing up your plans.
Can't, I'm sorry, just to go back, what would happen if you just took away some of the green space in the front? Does it help, or does that not help?
Then we wouldn't be compliant with the width of the driveways,
Because it would be too wide?
too narrow.
See, the other
I'm
piece
saying, why
of,
can't you widen the driveway?
the other piece of this, the big piece that we have here is that Mass DOT's gonna review it, and it's their jurisdiction primarily,
So then
as
what?
opposed to the towns. And so Mass DOT's gonna review this independently, and if they don't provide us with an access permit, that's on us. But if they do, I think they've determined that it's safe. I mean, you have your standard of 15, which has been the standard, I don't know how long. But you have, in terms of emergency vehicle circulation and the like, the fire department has reviewed that swept path analysis, as I said, and determined that it was safe and effective for their purposes. And Mass DOT is going to be the final arbiter, in all honesty, because their curb cut radii requirements are going to supersede the town's
Which
requirements.
are what, do you know?
Their curb cut radius is what was approved and what's existing out there are like 3 and 4 foot radiuses. That's what Mass DOT put in. So if we didn't make these curb cuts smaller, we could just leave them the way they are and they'd be existing. They'd be the way Mass Highway built them. We're making the curb cuts smaller because your regulations say they should be smaller. If we left them the way they are now, they would just be the way they are.
I cut off your question, John. You asked why they made the decision to place the building where they did, and I think I cut you off, and we haven't got that answer.
Well, no, you don't have an, I mean, that's sort of a separate issue. You obviously chose to keep I think you answered the question is that you're building it on the existing foundation because it's cheaper to do that. Or it makes more sense to do that, maybe that's not, is that the reason why you're doing it? I mean,
It also has to do with zoning.
Yeah, I mean, we had made the conscious decision to site the building in the location because of the existing foundation location. And it had been existing there for many, many years without any issues. And so,
Right, well, no, and it was existing there without any issues because it's a Chinese restaurant that doesn't have the same type of traffic.
Well, I think it would have greater traffic
Has more traffic.
under ITE.
It
Not
might
that
be-
Chinese restaurant.
Well,
That place was pretty notorious.
Well,
I've never
can't
seen.
pick 'em.
I've never seen more than 4 cars in that parking lot.
It likely
Whatever's amazing, it had a lot
predated
of-
site plan review.
Yeah.
Right,
Didn't
right.
have site plan
I
review.
have a technical question. So if it's a one-way entrance, do you draw the radii from one curb? Or is it like, in other words, is that, would you look at, because you're making a right at the first entrance, would you just be drawing the radii off of, no, the other one, Gene? Yep. Would it just be off of that curb, or is it both curbs at the radiuses?
It doesn't matter, they both have to have a radius of 15 under the regulations.
But 10 might be better. Here's my thing, is that TEC defers this to the board. I don't feel like we're necessarily adept enough to make that determination without
It's only
someone.
deferred because that's what zoning calls for. That's
Right,
what
but
Dave's
it,
pointing out.
right, but I guess for me, and I don't know how other people feel, I don't feel like I know enough why we have 15 as our minimum and what the implications of having, is this perfectly safe? Is this not safe? Like what, other than it looks small and it's narrow,
Yeah.
what actual effects does this have? If we're gonna be asked to be granted a waiver from our requirements, I've heard why you want the waiver, and I understand it, but I need to know what that actually means if we grant it. Does that mean that this is still perfectly safe based on the designs? Is it not safe because it's either too narrow or too wide, and there's gonna be, I guess I just don't know enough of what it means.
I would just say, if Mass DOT
I'm not gonna rely on what Mass DOT
built,
says.
well, it's their road. and
their
they-
Okay, then we can wait for them to make a decision
And
about your
they-
access permit and see what they
and
say.
And they built it with existing 3 and 4 foot radii.
Wait, they built what, I mean, they
That's
changed the
what
road.
They built it. They came on, they took an easement and went on this property, and they rebuilt it. They put a curb in and rebuilt. They put a curbing on this site, they put a curbing in the right-of-way, and they put 3 and 4 foot radiuses in,
and
and a double width curb cuts.
And that may be fine, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying that, that's exactly the point. If they put in 3 and 4 foot radii curbing, they must think it's
Yeah.
safe.
So,
I'm sorry, they wouldn't do it.
So I just, maybe just one comment, because I'm having a difficult time visual. Gene, can you go back to the other one?
Where's the 3 and 4 foot on this diagram? Because we just went through those, right? They're 10 and 8 and
Look at what's existing. It's, you
10.
you can see on the one where there's a R10 and an R10, you can
Right.
see the existing curb. It's
And
Go-
R8
come
and
down
10.
to the right. No, go back up. Okay. If you look at the drawing, that's where it says R10. Now to the left. No, too far. The one in the line in the middle, that's the existing curb that's there right now. Little lower, Gene.
It's R10.
Now, go to the right.
The
To the
black
middle.
and white or the green?
Too much. To the left, right there. That's the existing curb. That's the existing curb, and it has a 4 foot radius with no radius coming in from 125.
And you're saying Mass DOT did that?
Mass
when they-
DOT
when they
did
expanded
that.
When they expanded the road?
When they
On the road
expanded the road,
expansion.
right, like
Okay.
2 years ago.
And in addition, keep in mind the existing conditions of the site, which had a Mass DOT curb cut. You had parking all in front,
Yeah.
and we're eliminating that parking in front. So
So,
that's widening
yeah.
the scope of the access
Yeah,
by
I'm-
doing that,
I mean, what would help me understand, because I'm having a very difficult time visualizing this, is that if there was the radii, the current radii on this particular image, and what 15 would look like, right? Because I don't know whether or not like, if we went to 15, does it intersect the building, or does it intersect the playground?
It's both.
Yeah, but
because
I don't,
I think you can visualize
I
what
can't
that
visualize
looks
it,
like
yeah.
on this drawing, but we can't.
if you go back to the sketch, I drew it, it's in green.
But we
You can
can't
see-
see,
You
we
can see the
can't,
building. You can see the building, the green line goes right through the 0, and that's about 7 feet from the building face. I mean, you can see it right on the drawing. The sidewalk's 5 foot, that's about 4 foot more.
yeah, but I guess why do you need a turning radius on the left side if it's a one-way going in?
It's what your regulations require. That's the point.
and Gene, do you have any thoughts on Eitan's question about some type of expertise here to help us better understand what was the rationale for that requirement, and then we could better understand impacts if we decide to waive it?
I can talk to John Bajasi and get his opinion, or I can ask TEC what their opinion is of the origin of the 15.
Yeah, I mean, or just what the impact, I guess, not even, so the 15, yes, but why you have a minimum radius at all, and what the impact of reducing that minimum radius. That's what I haven't heard, and you guys probably know better, and maybe we sound dumb saying this, but I don't know why we have the 15 and what reducing that, what the benefit and cost of reducing that is. Does that increase the difficulty in seeing around the corners? Does it increase likelihood of more traffic congestion? Like, what's the point of all of this, and what effect does a waiver have of reducing it? That's what I don't understand. I wouldn't, until I understand, I don't feel comfortable waiving it. So some education, I guess, would help.
Understood, and I guess the only comment I will make is, no matter what this board decides, Mass DOT is going to overrule you.
That's not particularly comforting.
Well, it's
But
their
John,
jurisdiction.
let's
I
say
understand
Mass, let's say Mass DOT comes back and says something like what they did,
Yeah.
2 feet, 4 feet. If in fact the rationale for these rules are safety related, I understand state versus municipal
Right.
trumping, but if it's a safety implication, we would simply say, hey, we cry foul, you're jeopardizing safety. So I understand your
Sure.
argument, I think, but it's not good enough
Yeah.
if the implication here is something that rises
Yep.
to the level, whether safety or something else, and that's why we need to understand whoever our predecessors were that put this in place, why? What are the implications? What's the purpose? And then once we understand that, I think Eitan's summed it up. Well, if a waiver is warranted, fine.
Right.
And I think you need a highway access permit, but there have been waivers and there are other things that occur with that too. I mean, I don't think we can rely on some future MassDOT decision. I think
you always do, though. I mean.
no, we condition it,
Yeah.
right, which will still be the
Yeah.
condition, but
Yeah.
I don't think that absolves us of our responsibility to understand what you're asking for and why.
Yeah.
It may be a very easy yes,
Yeah.
once we understand it, or maybe a very easy no, I don't know, I really
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
It just seems like it seems like one of those things that could either be a really big deal or not a big deal at
Yeah.
all, and
Yeah.
I just don't know enough about the engineering to
Yeah.
say why. And after this, maybe we'll know, and we'll know for the future. But it hasn't come up before in the last. I don't remember coming up in the
Yeah.
last 7 years. So this is a new one for me.
Yeah. Well, maybe we get the opinion of TC.
Yeah.
Or
I think we can start with TEC
Or John or
and see what
whoever,
they say. And then the second
I
thing.
think-
So then again, the traffic engineer which are larger. The traffic engineer for this development has approved the radii, which are larger than those existing installed by MassDOT.
And I don't want to speak for TEC, but I think that in their review comments, if it was an unsafe condition, then they would have jumped on it. But I understand your concern. I
Okay, what
understand
about,
we'll have to just get some additional input somehow. Mass DOT also considers safety concerns as well, as you know, and so, but there may be differing opinions on that. So, but that's what we have to go on. I mean, what else can we say on that particular issue?
Okay. What about, there's a note about, this is comment 8 on the TEC letter, about lighting It says the landscape architect will address this item. TEC defers to the board determined based on forthcoming landscape architect comments.
I think we're okay on the lighting standards. To the extent that the board feels there's a need for a condition that the final photometric plan demonstrates compliance, we could do that.
Do we have a photometric plan, or will we?
I think there was one
there is.
submitted. Yeah, there is one
All
submitted.
right, so that's
But,
something.
but that's what he evaluated, and thus this comment was based on that.
Well, so that's my question. So he evaluated the photometric plan, and what was the result of that?
The result was
TUC
that
recommends revising the lighting layout as the lighting plan and details show illumination past the lot lines onto the abutting properties in the right-of-way. So usually we like our lighting plans to not have any lumens past the property line.
So there's no
and we-
spillover.
And we actually condition that and we'll have a look back to make sure that that actually occurs.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that your lighting plan seems to be forthright in saying that there's illumination past, but how are we
Yeah.
gonna deal with that?
Yeah. Well, we could either take in condition, or we could adjust the photometric plan when we come back.
Can we see the light? Do we have that?
Yeah, I don't think I have it in this week's.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, that-
I mean, I don't remember ever approving a lighting plan
It
with
wasn't
light
shown
going
at
beyond
last
the,
meeting.
beyond the property boundaries? Do you, anyone? No. So I would recommend adjusting that. I'm
Okay.
hesitant to say the board would approve a lighting plan that goes past the, property lines. Okay. Then there was. Okay, sidewalks, yeah, there's some comments about sidewalks, can you kind of walk us through where the sidewalks are? The TEC says, it appears there's no direct access to the front entrances of the building from the parking lot stalls located at the southwest corner of the site. TEC recommends the applicant add a designated pedestrian path, and I think your comments back were, since the parking proposed in this area is not the principal parking lot, the applicant prefers to landscape the islands rather than provide a sidewalk. And TEC is deferring to us on that.
Go to a landscaping plan, you'll see there's a sidewalk, it's in yellow on the landscape plan. And so it's around the building and the playground to the back and around the back of the building. And
So where they're
they're
saying the
suggesting
southwest
that
corner.
there's none to that area where Gene has the pointer right now. And so rather than provide a sidewalk there, we have the landscaped islands. Rather than making the islands concrete, we have them as landscaping.
So if someone parks on that far corner facing there, how would they enter the building?
They would walk over to the back sidewalk and come in the side entrance to the building on grade, further to the back left corner. There's a, just to your left a little bit, Gene. Yeah, right there. There's a door entrance right there.
And so
They would enter there, or they could enter the front by walking up the parking lot and to the sidewalk where the ADA spaces are.
Isn't like the desire path, if you will, to go straight across? What's the slope difference there? Like, because, as I said, what people would naturally do is they would go from that parking lot all the way over here, and they would walk straight.
They couldn't do that. There's a slope, there's a drop of about 6 feet.
There,
Yeah,
and what about
4
on
to
the
6
side,
feet.
perpendicular to the street? That.
Like where those are those pink houses or pink
Where
trees?
where the grass island is,
Yeah.
there's a grade drop. There's a 4 foot to 6 foot
Why
grade
don't you
drop.
just put a stairs?
Yeah, I think people would just walk.
I think that if we were to put the stairs there, we would give up a parking space to do that, and I don't really think, I think it would be quicker to walk. But I mean, there's a great transition that we're making. The The ADA, right now, the ADA parking on the site doesn't comply with ADA requirements. So in order to comply, we have to have the spaces within basically half a foot to 3/4 of a foot of the first floor of the building. And that site drops off 8 feet from the front to the back. So we have to elevate the side of the building, the grade to the left. So if you were to drive in that site right now, you'd come in and then you go down to the back, if you remember that. We're taking that and picking it up so that we can have the ADA spaces compliant with the
whole side or just that
that
immediate
whole,
side, the
that,
left?
the left side
Okay,
where you see the
the 2 arrows.
10, the 2 arrows, so right to the left of the building.
For
Then from there, we have a grass strip and then a retaining wall that goes to the parking down below that's stepped.
I mean, it seems to me that when parking on this side, what you're asking a person to do is either go towards the street where you've got the extra entrance and exit, which doesn't seem to be particularly safe, or to walk all the way down and around to where the sidewalk picks up. That seems like an awful lot. I still don't understand why you wouldn't put a stair in.
I assume most of that parking would be for the
I
medical.
mean,
use.
it's 70 feet, 80 feet. It's the width of the parking bays are 62. So it's not like they're, walking a great distance, walking the width of the parking lot.
Yeah, but people like to walk in a straight line.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're saying, well, I'm gonna walk down and across and then back. I mean, that's not simple.
Yeah, and don't we want to keep people off the parking lot when they get out of their cars and onto the site so they can get directly to where they're going?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure a sidewalk, TEC says maybe a sidewalk, I don't know that's, sidewalk seems kind of a little bit silly, but it seems like, I like John's idea. It seems like there should be some other means of access from the parking lot other than walking around. Okay, well, that's deferred to the board regarding access to the building. Then there was parking spaces. So can you talk to number 12, parking calculation of the daycare shown on sheet 1 appears to use the requirement for elementary and secondary schools. However, only students were accounted for in the calculation. Employees were not considered. Can you,
The building commissioner confirmed they're using what is on the table of uses. It doesn't say plus employees, it just
Okay.
says 35 per occupancy,
okay, great.
licensed capacity.
Okay, thanks.
That, and then there was a comment about the handicap parking, and they've made that adjustment to bring it in compliance with ADA. So he
Okay.
did agree with TEC that they weren't compliant.
Okay, great.
Number 20 is a simple change to a note on a plan.
Okay, yeah, not so worried about that. All right, just go through. Okay. Okay. All right. So I guess those are our open items. Is that it, Gene, in terms of what's open, what we just discussed?
Yep.
Okay, so next steps, are we waiting further comments from TEC, other than what we just talked about?
TEC, other than, I can talk to them about the 15-foot
Yeah,
radius. Other than that, they have addressed everything on the TEC memo, except for the ones that we just went over that were deferred to the planning board.
okay, and is there anything else outstanding?
Nope, stormwater is complete,
Okay,
and traffic is complete.
We added a sign to the sign package as well, the standing sign. And when we were before the ZBA, we had initially had a ground sign. And the ZBA was concerned about site distance, which we demonstrated could work with the existing location of the former location of the sign where it was when Hokkaido was operating. But to work things out, what we did is it was actually, the sign foundation was set back about 6 inches from the layout. And so he pushed it back to 6 feet. as the closest part of the sign to the layout, which is more than a couple of other signs that are along Osgood Street anyway. And so you see the sign is now, it's 10 feet in height, but it's like 30 square feet, which is below the 100 square foot max. And the max height is 20 feet in this district.
What was the, can you just tell us a little bit about the traffic? What was the gist of the traffic report, traffic study?
Derek, do you want to reach that?
Is this light working?
Yeah.
Should be. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. For the record, Derek Roach, traffic engineer with Vanessa Associates. So I did have a couple slides together, but we don't need to necessarily pull them up. They're not fascinating or anything. In terms of trip generation, we're expecting the site to generate about 816 daily trips, 134 peak hour morning trips, 140 weekday evening peak hour trips, only 138 Saturday trips, and 34 Saturday daily, and 34 Saturday midday peak hour trips. Yeah, if you want to go back to the first one real quick, I mean, this is the study area. TEC asked us to include the middle intersection there, so that's been included. We did address all of TEC's comments. We included all of them in the updated study.
Yeah, can we see the traffic?
Yeah,
if we could see this, because that's actually more than I expected. Is it, oh, okay. Is it broken down anywhere between the daycare and the?
Yeah, so column A is the daycare trips.
Oh, okay, yep, I've
Medical
seen that now.
is the column B, and then the total in the column C.
Weekday daily, 600 for the daycare. 148 students, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Although it's not shown in this chart, we all know what the restaurant was that was there, but under ITE, the restaurant would generate more traffic than what we have here. A restaurant of the size that was there, or that is there currently, I should say.
So maybe a restaurant down the street of similar size. Okay.
Anyway, so after we included all of TEC's comments, essentially the conclusions of the original study remain valid. The crash rates of the study area intersections were observed to be lower than MassDOT's crash rates for unsignalized and signalized intersections. Traffic volume increases to the study area relative to the 2031 no-build conditions are anticipated to range from 2 to 72 vehicles, 0.8 to 4.7% during the peak periods.
How do you calculate for like, so it's my, I guess, anecdotal experience, especially with daycares, a lot of where you go is like, is it on the way? So a lot of these trips, I would assume, are actually people who are already passing by on 125. Is that considered in any way?
I would suspect that is typically true. We did not take that into consideration ourselves. We were conservative in that. But, you know, there's the big Amazon that just went up.
Right, so this assumes all new people that
all
were
new
not
trips.
driving by, these are all new trips, when in
That is
fact,
correct.
there's a good chance that, right, if you're coming from the Princeton properties or you're coming next door, you may be driving past already.
Absolutely.
The Amazon's not throwing off any traffic, so that's.
That's not what I hear.
So, yes. We looked at the site distance at the study area at the site driveways. We found that they exceeded the recommended values for SSD and the desirable values for ISD. In terms of the capacity analysis we did at the study area intersections, that indicated that the project will result in a minimal impact on the delays in vehicle queues. Based on that, the recommendations remain the same from the original study. We propose that the site driveways be placed under stop sign control, painted stop bars included. All signs and pavement markings installed within the project site should conform to applicable standards of METCD. All signs and landscapes adjacent to the project should be designed to be maintained to restrict lines of sight. We just talked about, we had changed that sign to be taller to help with that. Snow windrows, which are, snow drifts, will be removed within the site triangles promptly. And we do propose some TDM measures. We'll we'll provide a welcome packet detailing available public transportation services, bicycles, micro-mobility devices, walking alternatives, and available commuter options. I know there's some future plans in the area to increase the pedestrian connectivity that's going through the 125 corridor there. Make available public transportation schedules, identify car, van pool resources, provide information on available pedestrian and bicycle facilities. All that will be posted in a central location on site. So that's essentially what the traffic study was. I believe we've addressed all of TEC's comments, and they didn't have any follow-ups after that. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we had that information on the record.
Just a sort of a general question, and this is, obviously that road right there is 2 lanes in each direction.
Correct.
It is generally not like, a super busy 2 lane in each direction, whereas sometimes there's a middle lane for turns and so forth. That strikes me as, unfortunately, kind of from just a general public policy point of view, kind of like the worst type of 2 lanes in each direction, because the problem is if somebody's taking a left to come into the place, that means there's traffic following them on the road. And is there, ultimately, is the solution to that to add lanes, or how do you ultimately deal with
typically that would be what you would do to do that. You would have to add turn lanes to get them separated from the people who want to continue straight. So you would think you'd be widening that.
It's also difficult because oftentimes if you're going to make a left, you have to cross 2 lanes of traffic. So sometimes someone being nice in this first lane will stop, but the person in the next lane.
Someone's been reading my traffic crash studies.
Inevitably, there's nothing we can do about it right now in the short term, but it's just not the safest.
Unless you make no left-hand turns and you have to go down to the light and turn around and turn around or something like that and make assign no left-hand turns. But this property is no different than every other one.
No, right. Because today I come down and take that left by Butcher Boy and then pull into the thing there, and you have to make that same thing across 2 lanes of traffic, so, yeah.
Mr. Chair, Gene, aren't improvements going to be made to the road there, though, by Butcher Boy and?
The intersection of 125 and 133.
So there'll be better stoplights, or in terms of the left?
Lane,
yeah.
as you're turning onto Great Pond Road, is going to be eliminated. That intersection's going to be a 4-way stop now.
4 ways.
With the light.
Oh.
The slip lane, so right next to Mad Maggie's? They're getting rid of that? I like that lane.
Yeah, I like that.
Better Mass Works grant.
That lane helps me get home quick.
Yeah.
I know, now I gotta stop?
Now you gotta go back out and come around.
Okay. But that, okay.
Better get lots of ice cream quickly.
Yeah.
You
have to go back out. Oh, that's okay. Interesting. Okay. So where does that leave us? Draft decision for next time, assuming TEC gets back to us? Potentially?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just need responses for the owns.
Yeah, and to the extent, guys, I think the radius question is, again, we need to be educated, so.
Yeah. And I have one comment, John, the owners aren't here, right?
Right.
Engineers and everyone. People have mentioned to me, can you ask them politely to clean up the site with the overgrown? I haven't been by it in about a week or 2, but other people have mentioned it to me with the weeds up front and some of the fencing is, I don't know, skewed a little bit.
Talk to them about it, yeah.
It's nice. It's right next to the brand new apartments and Butcher Boy and things like that.
Okay.
Just a town comment.
Okay,
Yeah, thanks.
thanks.
And,
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, and the owners are absentee, right? They're out of state?
Well, the company's based in Virginia. I mean, the franchise company is based in Virginia. But they also have, they have a childcare facility in Andover over by Minuteman, in North Reading too, so they're local. But,
Is this gonna be a franchise? Or is it just,
well, I think it's part of a franchise. I can get further clarification on it.
well, I guess I'm just a distinguish, I'm not sure how much about it, but between chain and franchise, right? Chain meaning it's a part of a group of childcare centers. They may be from out of state, from wherever, fine. Franchise means someone individually owning this particular one. Yeah,
Right.
so I guess I'd be curious as to that.
Pretty sure it's the latter, but I'll get clarification
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't make too much of a difference, but if there's someone more local that people have the opportunity to interact with, I think that's great, but.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's continue until November 26th and see what we can get done.
Okay, great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, Affordable Homes Act?
So, as we've discussed, it's anticipated that the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities is going to promulgate guidelines and regulations, however, they haven't done so yet. They have indicated they will in the near future, though. The presentation has been prepared to review tonight the legislation, which is going to be somewhat redundant because, as you know, a representative from KP Law was here a few meetings ago, and she did present that, but I thought it would be helpful to just go through the definition again and the legislation that's been enacted, and then discuss some reasonable requirements versus what I would consider questionable requirements, in that, as you know, this use is really falling under the Dover bylaw. And so, as with limited site plan review, we can administer reasonable regulations without guidelines and requirements. It's difficult to know exactly where that line is. But I wanted to kind of get a sense. Eitan and I have been talking about some draft language, and we wanted to get a better sense from the board as to, where you stand on some of these topics that historically have been fairly typical in an ADU bylaw, but with this new legislation, some conditions just are not going to be allowed going forward. And so,
And just on that, so Jean has done a great job putting together a kind of a template for us to work off of. And we've looked at some other towns' new ADU bylaws, and like there was one that was like 1 page long, and ours is not 1 page long because we're trying to change it everywhere that it's necessary. So because based on how our zoning bylaw is set up, we can't just change the ADU bylaw. We have to change other bylaws so that they all match, so we don't have to come back later on and do that. And we've been trying to go through all of these questions, and out of this 10, 12, 13-page bylaw, there's probably a handful of things that we're like, okay, we really need this as more of a, can we do it? And also kind of a policy, should we do it? And those are kind of the things we're kind of focused on with these things. Once we kind of get through this, we'll be ready to present the bylaw. But there's a lot of it that's housekeeping, and there's a lot of it that we don't have choices on, like some of the definitions. So this is kind of highlighting the things that we do have some choices on to get kind of opinions and guidance.
all right, so we'll go through this fairly quickly at the beginning, but the definition is a self-contained housing unit inclusive of sleeping, cooking, sanitary on the same lot as a principal dwelling, and that's really important. So they don't define principal dwelling, but as we know, in our residential zoning districts, we have instances where we have two-family and multifamily as principal dwellings on a lot. So they're subject to otherwise applicable dimensional and parking requirements that maintain a separate entrance, either directly or they can use a shared hall within the principal dwelling. And they have to meet safe egress requirements in building code. The ADU is not larger in gross floor area than half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. And that square feet reference is also in gross floor area. So we're going to talk a little bit more about gross floor area later. And is subject to additional restrictions as may be imposed by the municipality, including but not limited additional size restrictions and restrictions and prohibitions on short-term rental, short-term rentals are defined in Mass General Law under 64G. Provided, however, that no municipality should unreasonably restrict the creation of rental or an accessory dwelling unit that is not short-term.
So those are basically just out of the state law definition, the 2
State
and
law
3.
definition now. And that is in place as we speak. So that went in when the legislation was signed. And so Section 3 of the zoning act is protected uses, so that's known as the Dover Amendment. The Affordable Homes Act adds ADUs to this list of uses, like home childcare, handicap access ramps, solar energy systems, religious educational programs. These uses have been determined important enough to justify state-level protection from local regulation. These protected uses are listed in Section 3 of the zoning act, so Chapter 48 of the general laws. Like other protected uses, ADUs are still subject to reasonable regulation at the municipal level. And then the legislation itself. So this is Section 8, and this becomes effective February 2nd of 2025. And so that's what we're working towards, is ahead of that to hopefully notice a public hearing for a ADU zoning amendment. And so no ordinance or bylaw shall prohibit, unreasonably restrict, or require special permit or other discretionary zoning approval for the use of land or structures for a single ADU or the rental thereof in a single-family residential zoning district. Again, a term that's not defined in the legislation, but we'll talk a little bit later about potentially defining that. Provided that the use of land or structures for such accessory dwelling unit under this paragraph may be subject to reasonable regulations, including but not limited to Title V, if applicable, site plan review, regulations concerning dimensional setbacks, and the bulk and height of structures, and may be subject to restrictions and prohibitions on short-term rental. The use of land or structures for an ADU under this paragraph shall not require owner occupancy for either the ADU or the principal dwelling, provided that not more than one additional parking space shall be required for an ADU, provided further no additional parking if you're within 0.5 miles of a commuter rail station, subway, ferry, or bus terminal. For more than one ADU or rental thereof in a single-family residential zoning district, there shall be a special permit for the use of land or structures for an ADU. And again, they've indicated they're going to, the legislation actually says they may issue guidelines. There was a webinar that EOHLC hosted a week or so ago, and they did indicate they will promulgate regulations and guidelines. And so as Aton was...
They stated that many times.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear any of them with an estimated timeline.
They did not estimate a timeline.
Why all the reassurance if they couldn't even say, a month, 2 months, 3 months?
They've attended previous webinars where they weren't necessarily the host, but they did speak at them, and they've heard numerous questions. I mean, each one of these webinars, 300 to 600 people attend them, and the same questions are being asked over and over. It's just until we get those regulations,
Okay.
they're not being answered with any confidence. And so as Aton alluded to, once we put an ADU bylaw in, it's going to impact other articles in our bylaw, such as the definitions. And currently, in Article 4, which is the building and uses permitted, in residential 1, 2, and 3, the very first permitted use is a one-family dwelling, but not to exceed one dwelling on any one lot. That's what's there today, and so we would likely need to add something except when lawfully permitted in accordance with, and the next article to add under Article 8 is, the next part to add is Part 14. So I'd refer to it as Article 8, Part 14 would be the ADU section. Residential 4 has similar language, one residential building per lot, and again, potentially we add except when lawfully permitted in accordance with Article 8, Part 14.
So those are some housekeeping, just to make sure our definitions match.
So supplementary regulations, Part 3, to add ADUs to limited site plan review. So right now, we list childcare, educational, religion, we would add ADU. And then the new Part 14 would be ADUs. And then the summary of use regulations, Table 2, would add ADUs as to the table itself.
So what we did, yeah, keep going, Gene. So one of the things that we had talked about previously as a board is attached versus detached. The law allows and requires us to allow for both. But the law does also allow for site plan review, not special permits, but site plan review. And what Gene and I kind of discussed, and definitely looking for feedback, was that attached ADUs are really basically like building an addition to your house. It's already attached, it's part of your house, it's really not much different than making an addition. And so we're trying to think of, okay, when you add an addition, what kind of criteria do you need? Well, we don't make you come for site plan review when you're having an addition, unless it triggers something else, right? Unless it triggers a watershed special permit, unless it triggers a land disturbance permit, some sort of parking, unless it triggers something else, we don't make you come in. So that's how we treated the attached. Detached seems to have a potential for a much greater impact on your neighbors and neighborhood. So we figured that would be more appropriate for a site plan review. Let's make sure we have the appropriate screening and that it's in the appropriate place and not, obviously it has to meet setbacks and things like that. So that's kind of how we went about with some of these definitions and what we were looking to do with them. And again, that's all, none of it's written in stone, but that was our thought.
Another one, front yard. So in one of the webinars, it was conveyed that it seems to be reasonable to restrict detached ADUs from the front yard, but you'd have to define what is a front yard. And so the area land located between the front building line of the principal dwelling extended to the side property lines in the street is how I defined that. Short-term rental, we just put a rental of 30 consecutive days or less. Now, Chapter 64G has a really long definition. I don't think we necessarily need to go to that, but we certainly can reevaluate this definition. And then single-family residential zoning district, again, because the legislation doesn't define it, I defined it as any zoning district that allows for a one-family dwelling permitted use. And so whenever there's a single family, technically that's what the ADU intent was, to add it to a single family, but as I raised the concern, a principal dwelling could be something different than that. So I defined it any zoning district that allows one family dwelling permitted use, and in our bylaw, that's residential 1 through residential 6, village residential, and B1 actually allows for single families. B1 is the historical center, so there's, I think, only 4 lots: the brick store, the Hayscales building, the lodge, and 1 house attached to the Hayscales are B1.
So what does that then do to the earlier discussion of what if it's a duplex or a fourplex?
That is the principal dwelling. Everything I've heard is we'd have to allow for an ADU on
And
that lot as well.
This definition would not restrict that.
Would not restrict
Did
that.
we have somewhere where we had somewhere where we were talking about that, right? I forget in our draft if we had somewhere where we were talking about. I'm just trying to remember. Did we have anything?
No, you, at one point, you had requested change it from principal dwelling to single-family dwelling,
Right.
and we just can't do that.
Right, it's
the
gotta
law
be-
is principal.
But I guess I was waiting for guidance on this because
Yeah.
I disagree with the KP law. I don't see how a 2-family can be a principal dwelling because there are 2 different families living in there. So who is it a principal dwelling for? I don't consider it a dwelling for the owner because if the owner's not living there, and if they're renting one, I don't consider that they can do. If that was the case, then either they both can put an ADU, which makes no sense to me, or whoever does it first can put an ADU. Like that again, that also doesn't make sense to me. So, I'd like to see the guidance, but I would be amenable to putting something in that's saying that it only applies to single-family homes, because I can't understand how the regulations were meant to say otherwise.
I agree with you, but the state will still trump what we put in no matter what.
Agreed.
And it seems to me that they intentionally left it vague, maybe.
I don't know. Maybe Kate's a bit.
Yeah,
that's for your opinion. I think it's potentially
if you do, you
unconstitutionally
open up
vague.
Pandora's box. Think
It's
about
so
it.
vague to say
Yeah.
1-family dwellings and single-family districts, because every town has different names for things, and there's no state guidance as to what those names mean. I just can't see that a 3-family gets an ADU, or each of them get an ADU, and now it's 6. That's just
So we did
to me,
take-
not what the legislation was meant to do.
We did take the position of only one per lot, even though it says more than one shall be by special permit. That's really not conclusive either, so.
Right.
It doesn't mean we have to allow them, but if we were to allow them by special permit, again, we need the guidelines for that.
But even if it's a two, I hate the idea. Let's say it's a two-family, each, like a condex, and each owned individually. So whoever applies for it first can get an ADU. That makes no sense to me, just like logistically, like that was the intent.
Yeah.
And so I find it extremely vague, potentially unconstitutionally vague, which doesn't help us, but I like the idea of ADUs. I think that they are a great tool that we can use, but I think the state made it way too vague, and so I'd probably err on, until we get guidance, err on the side of being more restrictive, and until we're told otherwise that we can't do that. As long as we're allowing the things that are the core, right? The core of this is an attached single family. I think that's the core of it. That's what it's meant to
I
allow.
think that was the intent.
And then the added stuff, the detached, okay, well, if it's done right, then it's probably gonna be a good thing. At least we have some review on
I
that.
agree what you said, restricted until we hear otherwise, the single family.
Yeah.
I agree with that approach. Does that violate your comment, John, about opening Pandora's box?
No, I think it closes the door.
Good, okay.
Right, do you-
I mean, I'm just saying for myself, I agree with the approach that you just articulated.
Yeah, until we see guidance other, it just doesn't make sense to me that a two-family and a three-family, they're already two-family, that's the whole point of it. I mean, and if you own both of them, then make one of them, I don't know, but, okay, so I think that's what we'll try to do until, I mean, we were hoping to get some guidance on that by the end of the month, so
Yep.
we'll see what happens, but I think we should leave that as a placeholder, not put anything in yet, and see if we get some guidance, but I think I'd be inclined to put something back in saying it's only for a single family dwelling, one family dwelling, whatever
Yeah,
language we use. One family dwelling?
one family is what we use.
Okay.
I just wanted to back up to these numerous articles that get affected here. So the quantum of vote for the ADU bylaw is simple majority, where all these others likely will remain at 2/3. And so that gets a little tricky too, as to the order that these get presented.
Okay.
All right, so then potential reasonable regulations. So as Aton said, we were talking about having the attached ADUs and within ADUs by right use administered through the building department. And so.
Anybody have any issue with that? Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I don't think we need to, again, I don't think there's going to be proliferation of 30 ADUs the first year, but I think as we get them, that's not something that we don't need to touch everyone.
Yeah, but they'd still be subject to all the general requirements and
Yeah.
dimensional
All the
requirements.
dimensional.
And
Yeah. They'd have to
Yeah.
get the building permit, they'd have to show that they
they comply with.
comply with
everything.
zoning and comply with the 900 square feet or that 50%.
And Gene, just to clarify, if someone pulls a permit that has septic and have to go through Title V, so like the building commissioner flags the health department to oversee?
All our applications actually go to all department heads.
Okay.
So when somebody applies for a building permit, Peter must have done this, everybody has to check it before it can get issued. So,
I think that a prerequisite to being on the planning board perhaps should be that you would have to obtain a permit to build something.
And so when I first moved here, I got the small project conservation permit to build a fence so that my kid wouldn't run away. That was challenging. I lived next to her.
Try doing it in Somerville and Cambridge. Spend 2 years of your life going through it, so,
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
It's every department.
yeah.
Yeah.
all right, so detached ADUs require limited site plan review. No new curb cuts. Now, when we come down with something hard and fast, and again, in one of the webinars, it was suggested that that would be reasonable, but I think we should have provisions to allow for waivers of things like this, and so that was one that, in my opinion, we'd have some loose language through the planning board. Some of these things could get waived if necessary. So detached ADUs not allowed in the front yard.
And that's not one of the ones that would be waived, or are you saying even that?
Yep, so even that, and so I have examples of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't mind, I agree with Gene, I think we should have rules and allow for a waiver. There could be a compelling reason why
Well,
you might need a
it
curb
could
cut,
be-
but it has to come here.
Well, or the front yard thing.
Right.
But the placement of the house is so weird
Right,
that maybe a waiver is appropriate.
right, your front yard faces a commercial area or something like that, where it's not gonna impact anybody else, or
So there's
it's the end of a cul-de-sac or something, there's
I
some.
took pictures today, I didn't move them in, but, so when you're on Osgood Street coming from the Common, there's two colonials that were somewhat recent, 80s, 90s, and then there's a long ranch that has this beautiful barn right at the street level. I mean, potentially that could be an ADU and it could be perfectly fine, and so I think we need provisions for that.
Is it a historic barn?
I would say so.
Wow.
It's beautiful, I'll say that.
Wow, there could be options there.
We got James in the list, Peter.
There's other instances where potentially a barn or a
Right.
detached garage, maybe closer to the street line than the
Yes.
house for a
Yeah.
ranch.
Right, maybe something's already
So
there,
that'd be
yeah.
an example of a potential waiver.
Waiver,
Right.
that's,
Yep.
again, my
Good.
opinion.
Thank you.
I think for the most part, if it's a new detached
Right.
structure, then chances of waiving
Right.
that should be really slim.
Yep.
All right, and then we talked about Title V and fire regulations and local bylaws, safe egress, all that's reasonable. One off-street parking space is allowed by law, and I think reasonable. So then,
Jean, on that, and just, I came from a jurisdiction that already had ADU law, and the parking had been an issue at times. Does the, and I know the bus station, bus terminal was a little bit confusing, but are the language that allows for no parking places, does that have any applicability within the applicable single-family?
I think
Or, did I say that right? Yeah.
because of the MBTA communities, they had first said we have area of land within 0.5 miles of the Lawrence Station, and it's at the very end of Mass Ave. So there may be a couple of houses there that would be within 0.5 miles of a station.
Okay.
Very limited, very limited.
Otherwise, a parking place, a
Would be-
parking spot would be required.
In addition to the regular required for
Right.
that dwelling.
Good, okay.
So then the building height of attached ADU shall not exceed the height of the principal dwelling. Again, as reasonable as that sounds, we might want to allow for a waiver. If it's a detached garage in some remote location that somebody wants to put a second floor on that, and it's a ranch house to begin with. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any harm in allowing it, and to start off that way, and if adjustments need to be made in the future, we could. And again, in that scenario, the detached ADU would require limited site plan review as well,
Yep.
and through that process could get a waiver.
Do you have a question with respect to, I guess, a reasonable regulation? For detached ADU, is a reasonable regulation a permanent structure being an attached ADU?
I'm sorry,
Like a permanent, like in other words, something that's not mobile and 900 square feet.
So this has come up in the webinars, that potentially a trailer could be dropped in someone's backyard as long as they take the wheels off of it and set it. It becomes a structure, and it could in fact be an ADU.
I don't think you could get a building permit for something that's not a permanent structure.
I don't know.
I think
don't know.
them saying as long as they take the wheels off,
That-
the intent
right,
of
that
that is to
makes
make
it
it
a
a permanent,
structure.
it's not temporary. at
But I
that
think
point.
I don't think we have to define it as a permanent structure, because I don't think you can get a permanent building permit if it's
This
not a
is-
permanent structure.
I mean, this is kind of a silly question. Do you need a permit to drop a trailer in your backyard?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And live in it?
No, that's different.
Yeah, if that's what you're
Versus
asking.
living in it. So like, if
Yeah.
I just want to have a trailer in my backyard, I can
Yeah,
have
yeah.
a trailer in my backyard.
Well, I mean, yes, obviously to live in, right?
Well, if
Yeah.
you have to live in something, then it has to be habitable, so no,
No.
Okay.
you have to get a permit yes, you have to get a permit to live in a structure. To live in something, you have to get a permit, yes.
And our bylaw is one dwelling per lot today.
Because that would be a dwelling,
Yep, got it.
right? So that would violate the part about not
Okay.
having more than one dwelling on a lot without following the rules.
So going back to my question is, I mean, irrespective if they take off the wheels, like, could we add regulation that has to be a permanent structure, or does it matter? Even if, I guess that's my question, is that a reasonable,
I think the law says it has to meet state building code.
okay?
So I don't think it matters.
You don't think it matters?
I don't think
Okay.
we need to worry about that. 'Cause
Okay.
I think it's covered. I think it's covered. I think it has to be a permanent structure.
I agree.
But it could be a mobile home.
That's what I'm getting at.
So you could have a neighborhood that has a bunch of lots that are sort of identically suitable for parking, not parking, but plopping down a mobile home
Yeah.
and
Something that you could theoretically, I mean, it can't have wheels on it, but
No.
something that could be picked up by a trailer or something like that
well, you drive it in and
and drop it.
put cinder blocks under it and take the wheels off, and
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
mobile home.
Yeah, yes. I think we have to allow that, yes.
Okay.
That I think we have to allow.
We need the guidelines, but all indications are that would be allowed.
But there's another thing here that talks about a detached has to be similar architecture.
Well,
We're gonna
we'll
talk
get
about
to
that.
Okay.
We're gonna
We
talk
have-
about that.
We
Yeah,
have that under
that-
questionable.
That's, yeah, we'll talk about that. We're gonna get there. We'll get there.
All right, and so the next one is,
Didn't work for Merrimack.
so we've mentioned this a couple times, where a special permit, including watershed or a variance, are required, that they'd still be required to obtain all permitting necessary. This one I'm not sure we need, or, I saw it in somebody's bylaw, but, the ADU should not be used for boarding and/or lodging or other commercial use, with the exception of permitted home occupations. And so our bylaw already defines guest house and rooming houses, and there's certain areas, those are permitted uses as they,
I like it. I mean, this says you can't, you can rent it, not short-term rental, but it can be a rental property, but it's supposed to be somebody's home.
It's
It's not supposed to be
residential,
a
it's not
bed
commercial.
and breakfast or an inn or
I
something
like
like
this
that.
as well, and I think
Yeah.
it's a sort of a corollary to not short-term rentals or not these things.
I like it.
Yeah, it adds clarity.
okay. And home occupations is a defined term in our bylaw, so they have to meet certain requirements in order to become a home, to allow a home occupation. Not used as short-term rental, and then once the ADU has been constructed, it shall never be enlarged beyond half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet of gross floor area allowed by
So
statute.
Was that a
what
question you would
happens
ask,
if the
Yeah.
principal dwelling is expanded? Then can you expand the ADU?
Not more than 900 square feet, so.
Yeah.
And didn't we have like a 5-year? or
Yeah,
did
we
take
took that out.
We took that out?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was
We originally
just
had
too
something that said, like, you can't, if you have an ADU, you can't you can't increase your building size within a certain amount of time to get it, but I think we just
Keep it
dive
simple.
back, just keep it to it can never be more than 900 square feet.
And was that one pertaining to attached or separate?
All ADUs, yeah.
Okay.
And the statute says whichever is smaller, but we don't need that language.
Because I put it under area allowed by statute for this bylaw, and we've said that a number of times.
No, yeah, but, I mean, I think that's actually a good point. It might not be bad to just say whichever is smaller as allowed by statute and or this bylaw. I think that's actually a decent clarification
Okay.
and just stays consistent. I don't know, it's like you don't want to be too repetitive, but at the same time, you want to be consistent, so I
Okay.
think that one I'd chalk up to consistency. Let's do that.
All right, and then questionable, reasonable regulations. This first one, we definitely need guidance. So there shall be no more than one ADU, either within, attached, or detached on any lot. ADUs shall not be eligible for zoning dimensional variances, proposing to increase the number of allowable ADUs on a lot. On the webinar with EOHLC, this was specifically asked, and the response was, it's to be determined. So it's,
So that's the language that says in the statute that multiple ADUs on a lot a special permit shall be required. And the question, in the discussion we had with the KP law attorney and that I've seen on else is, does that mean you have to have them and they're a special permit? Or if you allow them, they're by special permit? I think that's how I read it. So I think we can take the position, again, where it's vague, that you can't have more than one ADU on a lot and leave it at that until we hear guidance otherwise.
all right, accessory dwelling units shall be compatible in design with the primary residence. The response to that from EOHLC was regulations will give some broad examples of what is allowed and what is not. And then even if it is allowed, who determines compatibility?
I personally don't think this would be allowed under the statute. I don't think it's reasonable. And again, especially for us, all right, so we're separating attached versus detached. Right now, this applies to both. If it has to be compatible attached, most likely it's going to be, but does the building inspector make that determination? Because we're not seeing
Yeah.
it. And I think that's a really difficult
Yep.
thing to put on the building inspector. And then when it comes here, to the point about the mobile, I do think the law was written to allow for a mobile home.
Yep.
And a mobile home is never gonna be compatible in design
Yep.
with the primary residence.
True.
So I would, if I was arguing against this, I think you have a compelling case to say that's unreasonable because you're not allowing a mobile home at all, pretty much. So I think this is,
Does the law say anything about mobile homes?
it doesn't disallow them. It specifically
Right.
doesn't disallow them. And it's specifically to allow for various types. Like, they knew that you could be detached or attached. They knew, I think it was pretty specific to be broad in what it was going to allow. So, I think we hold and don't do anything with this until hopefully we have some guidance, but I would be hesitant to put
I mean, that's my argument with the permanent structure, right? Like, if we added a permanent structure language, we kind of address some of the issues on the, I guess, potential mobile home, if there was a concern there, but those.
So I still think a mobile home is a permanent structure.
Once the wheels are off.
are off.
Yeah,
And it's not, I mean, it's gonna look like a box, it's gonna it's a shipping container, right?
okay, yeah, no, it's true, it's true. I mean, I guess to that end, especially on the detached stuff, is it reasonable to regulate that we underground utilities to the detached structure?
My understanding is not through zoning. So zoning doesn't allow for requirements for utilities.
I mean, I don't know how else are they gonna, I don't know, the National Grid's gonna come out and connect them.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of like, you go into certain areas of town that don't have underground utilities, and like, again, thinking of growth and everyone pulls an ADU permit, then we have more wires to see, right?
Well,
You
if
see
it's
the same-
attached, obviously, they're not. But
Yeah, if it's attached, but if it's detached,
Detached, it's a little bit more problematic. I think you would have, that just feels to me outside the scope of zoning, because you get into hassles with the electric company and stuff and that sort of thing, you know.
Cause what if the electric company says, no, we don't do underground wires here? And
Like, I just don't see the electric company on certain parts of town that we're feeding off the poles, all of a sudden just going, okay, everyone's feeding off the poles, but just for your ADU, we're gonna go underground. You know,
yeah, I
they're
mean,
not-
I just,
that's
like, yeah, I'm
not
just,
gonna-
yeah.
And the other check, they're constantly saying, well, do you do that for single-family homes? Do you do that for multifamily homes? Like, why would you want to do that for an ADU? So that's kind of the
Yeah, I guess my
the
argument is
balance.
that if we're tying everything to the primary dwelling or one lot, right, is that you could put design criteria where, like, maybe instead of undergrounding from the pole, right, you're undergrounding from the primary dwelling to the detached ADU. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't know that they have any control over that, like when they design it. So I don't think we could do that.
The guidelines might have something to do with utilities, because a lot of people have asked the question.
Yeah.
But,
It's a good question.
Yeah.
For a detached ADU, do the utilities come from the primary dwelling or from the street?
Yeah.
It's a fair question.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
wouldn't that be up to the electric company? I mean, I really have no idea how you establish who.
Yeah,
Does it?
but again, if it's tied to, if you have one power line, 200 amps coming to your primary dwelling, right? Why couldn't you underground from your primary dwelling to the detached ADU?
But who?
what if you only have 100 amps?
But either way, how do?
But you're gonna have to, yeah, well,
Well, how do you do it? I mean, I honestly don't know. What if you build a shed in your backyard and you want it to have electricity? How do you actually get?
you would dig a trench with a conduit
You-
and go to, yeah, like you'd hire a contractor, your electrician would dig a trench
And
and drop a conduit to go from your primary dwelling.
I also think it's
Right?
I mean, you're adding a lot of expense there too.
Well, and they're gonna have water and plumbing and. all
Right,
that
that's
Yeah,
true.
stuff.
I mean,
and other utilities
sewage,
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my whole argument, I mean, it's more so in the, like, if you're undergrounding and doing all of that, right? I mean, I guess, is it, I don't know, maybe it's not reasonable, or maybe it is. and maybe I'm just getting stuck on just me seeing wires, a lot of wires going to attach ADUs that we can all see, is like whether or not there's an opportunity to reasonably regulate the undergrounding, at least of the electric wires from either the primary dwelling, which is probably the easiest, to the detached ADU.
I mean, I gotta say, I don't think we can require it, but we are doing site plan review for the detached, so it's a question, it's a question you can ask and bring up is, hey, can you do this?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that you can require it, but I think
Could
you
it
can.
be something like where feasible, electrical connection should be underground from the primary well?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So something that's guidance, I think is possible.
Yeah.
Something, a preference, maybe. Where did we do the architectural guidelines that we had as suggestions but not requirements?
We have,
No,
the mill area has design guidelines, but they're,
No, but there was something recently, I'm just tired, where we couldn't say you have to do this, but we said we would really like it if you made it X, Y, and Z.
I think we say that often.
Yeah, we do.
But we actually put it in, maybe was it with Royal Crest? No, maybe.
it might have been Royal Crest, but the last bylaw amendment was the mill area that had design guidelines that were waivable. And the Royal Crest draft zoning did as well.
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking of. So I think we could make that as, yeah, I like the feasible, as a suggestion. Okay.
Okay.
So any new or separate outside entrance?
So the town we used to live in, where they passed a bylaw allowing ADUs when we moved there, this was one of their requirements. And from my experience living there, it was considered to be a reasonable requirement.
And again, I would advocate for a waiver of this requirement.
Yes.
And in some circumstances, it might not be possible.
Yep. Same there. Yep.
And then the attached ADU, all stairways to the second and third be enclosed within the exterior walls. Again, they're putting an addition on to do an attached, and you'd think they'd have the ability to do that, but I think we'd also have to have the ability to waive it.
Yep. Okay. So family suite, this is
So when we say an attached ADU, it doesn't, in my mind, necessarily mean that you're adding a structure attached to the primary structure. You, I think, could be taking the existing structure that remains exactly the same footprint, but you're separating part of it internally.
So actually, we have a different definition.
Defined within.
That's a
Okay.
within ADU.
Yep.
What's that?
That's a within
Within,
ADU.
okay.
So within the structure, attached, you're adding to your
Got it.
structure.
All right,
They
thanks.
still have the same rules in terms of
So
size.
I actually did go through these, but I
Yeah.
didn't see that.
Yep.
So thank you.
Yep.
All right, now family suite. So we have this, a lot of people really have never been aware of this, but we have an existing family suite bylaw today. The intent of it was similar to an in-law apartment where it specifies certain relatives that can live in this family suite. The size is different from what the legislation requires for ADUs. So family suites can be up to 1,200 square feet or not more than 25% of the gross floor area of the principal unit, whichever is less. So in some circumstances, someone could have larger than 900, and so I know some people are advocating to keep family suites in addition to ADUs, and there's nothing that says we couldn't do that if we wanted to.
But, okay, go on. Well, let's finish. I think there's some points too. Let's just go through.
Okay.
'Cause I think there's some really good points later on.
Yeah, so the important thing here is it's located within a single-family dwelling or attached to a single-family dwelling. So these don't allow for detached, although I did speak with the ZBA chair, and on occasion, they have approved detached over a garage. I think most recently, there was one on Beverly Street. So not unheard of, but the vast majority of these are either attached or within. And so that is the definition of a family suite, and then in the permitted use sections of residentials 1 through 6, they allow for the use of a family suite, which is same thing, separate dwelling within or attached by special permit through the zoning board of appeals as granting authority. The dwelling unit is not occupied by anyone except brothers, sisters, maternal and paternal parents and grandparents, or children of the residing owners of the dwelling unit. The premises are inspected annually by the building inspector for conformance to this section of the bylaw, and the special permit shall be recorded at the North Essex Registry of Deeds. And so when somebody gets a special permit, it's for a specific relative that's going to be living in that ADU. When that occupancy turns over, technically the ADU is supposed to be dismantled, or they go back and permit it for somebody different. So the ADU runs with a certain, the family suite runs with a certain occupant. And so, for tonight's discussion and trying to get a sense of how people feel, I just posed a few questions. So should the town allow for both ADUs and family suites? And I did speak with the town manager, and once we get a sense from this board, she'll run it by the select board as well to get feedback from them. And so if yes, we want to keep both, should the family suite bylaw be moved to within the ADU bylaw? And I think it should. You should find them both at the same place if we're going to have both. And should the permissible familial relationships be expanded?
So I think, could Jean, just talk about the metrics. I think the metrics thing, this is, to me, the most important and kind of, in my mind, deciding factor.
Okay, so ADUs, if you have an 1,800 square foot home, 50% of the gross floor area, or 900 square feet, whatever, is less. And so this equation comes out, they'd both be 900 square feet. So anyone with an 1,800 square foot home
Or greater.
or greater can have a 900 square foot, which is the max allowed. A family suite, you'd have to have 3,600 square feet, because it's only 25% gross floor area for a family suite, not 50%. So at 25%, that equates to 900 square feet.
So if you have a 2,500 square foot home, which is Chris, any idea what the average home size North Andover?
In North Andover?
Yeah.
I would say that plus or minus.
2,500.
Yeah.
Right, so let's say that's an
Yeah,
average.
That's fair.
2,500 at 0.25, you're talking 612, right? Or-
625.
Okay. Okay. No, 612 and a half, but maybe my math is wrong. Anyway, 600 something square feet. There would seem to be no benefit to the family suite. You have added regulations, added requirements, and you could just do the, and you couldn't do detached, at least according to what the bylaw actually says. So until you have a 3,600 square foot home, you don't get, the family suite is only beneficial to people with really large homes.
3,600 or greater,
Right.
up to 4,800 where you'd max out at your
Right.
1,200. So you'd have to benefit from a family suite versus an ADU, you'd have to have a greater than 3,600 square feet.
So I guess with that, with the metrics, should we then just repeal and replace?
I would
Right?
just get rid of
Like
the
going
family
back to
suite.
Peter's point with respect to pulling a building permit, taking one piece of, I guess, maybe overview or another board to see? I don't know.
No, to me, I would say you just get rid of the family suite. I mean, all you're doing is benefiting, you're benefiting people who have larger houses more than anybody else, when the ADU seems like it would be sufficient. So, like, for anybody else, you don't get the benefit of it.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure, for that 1,200 square feet, what's the added value to the community?
So I can't quite formulate an example, but I'll just phrase this as a question. Is there a case, for whatever reason, somebody who wants to do this, but to use their residence for this purpose only for family members? And they're gonna rent it, but they're gonna restrict it to family members. If it's an ADU, I'm not sure that you can restrict a
You cannot.
rental.
You cannot.
But let's say a family literally just wants their family members. The family suite for them might be a preference.
Why couldn't they just do that with an ADU?
But once they rent it, they can't say, oh no, we're not gonna rent to you because you're not our family,
You can
right?
rent to whoever you want.
Yeah, because.
You can rent to whoever you want. You don't have to rent it to anybody in particular. You can't discriminate based on
Right.
protected classes, but you can just say this is going to be for my family member, sure. I'll put the converse to you. So is there a situation where there's other than the 36 to 4,800 square feet, there's really no benefit because you can rent to or sell to whoever you want. Here's the convert. So could there be a situation where, yes, it would really be helpful for someone to have that extra 1,000, or extra 100 square feet, I guess so. But here's what's gonna happen, is that it's going to go to my in-laws for 10 years, and then maybe they move out or pass on or something like that. And then it's gonna become an ADU that's 1,000 feet. That's what's gonna happen to it. So it gives a small measure of relief to someone who has an already big house already, and later on just becomes an ADU, which is bigger than what we
Well, the one, and I think combining is the right answer, but part of the reason is in the case of a family suite, in often cases, because I know a couple of them that do exist, there is not the physical separation of the dwelling units that exist in when it's not family. Because if it's in the same family, yeah, you may have your own kitchen, you may have your own bedroom, but there's not going to be walls between the two. They're going to be.
Is there does a definition?
And the question is, how would the building inspector view that? Would the building inspector say, no, this has to be separate, you have to pay for these extra walls, and the family's saying,
Well, I don't think there's anything in it that, but the ones that I know,
It says
I'm
it's
not
separate.
going to tell you who they
Yeah,
are.
but it says it's supposed to be
they don't-
separate.
I'm pretty sure they don't do that. I
And
think
how-
the space is.
Why isn't that just an addition?
Or just a house with a lot of family.
It doesn't seem, because it's supposed to be a
Well-
separate dwelling unit. The definition,
Well,
the literal
no,
definition.
family suite is where you have like separate kitchens and two separate families live there.
But it's supposed to be a separate unit. By definition, by our
It's supposed to
rule.
be, but-
I would say that doesn't count,
Oh, okay.
to be honest.
Do we know how many
Biggest
there are?
one.
Do we know how many there are right now, or how many applications
The
come in?
family suites,
There's like
Yeah.
10.
there's like 5 or 6 on average a year
A
that get
year.
permitted, but the concern is, they never get demolished, so
Oh, yeah, they're no longer family suites down the road.
they're ADUs down the road, and
Yeah.
to Aton's point,
You can
then
have two
they
kitchens in your
benefited
house.
for a larger
No,
one.
I know you can have two kitchens in your house, yeah.
But a larger one results in higher rents, right?
Yeah.
And-
Right.
And the intent
Yeah,
of these
yeah.
is small A affordable, and now you have 1,200 square foot rental units, which is bigger than any of these multifamily
So
units.
this
I
will be
think-
subject to gaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much.
So, I mean, again, I think it's a no-brainer because, in my opinion, is that between the metrics and like based off your calculus, Aton is an average of square foot of 2,500 square feet, and just cleaning up, and we have effectively one bylaw that actually regulates accessory dwelling units instead of the gaming of the system, if you will, right? I just think and plus from an efficiency standpoint, because in the current family suite, the building inspector has to go confirm that actually family members are going over
Which
there.
doesn't happen.
Which doesn't happen.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
So,
right.
I just think it's,
Yeah.
It's also based on a very traditional idea of family.
I agree. So if we were gonna keep it in, I would advocate to extend the definitions. But so that was one of the questions, like I would increase the definitions of family. But I guess the metrics thing, I was like on the fence, but the metrics thing for me kind of tells the story of, it's really, with the ADU bylaw, it's really not necessary. And the downsides with gaming and using it as now a big rental unit, I think are a lot higher than any potential benefits.
so if we do repeal and replace, then any current family suites would be existing non-conforming, I guess?
They'd still be legal, they'd run with a special permit
Special
for that
permit runs
person,
until
Got
then.
it.
as long as they run.
But afterwards,
Oh,
you'd have, just like you would have,
Got it.
normally have to. Now, that'd be an interesting question, is if it's, and which I don't think we need to answer, if it's allowed now, could you substitute a family member later on into the same family suite? I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think we need to decide that. It is not before us. So unlike certain Supreme Court decisions, we're not gonna touch it. We're gonna leave it alone. All right.
Another thing we don't have to decide tonight, but it struck me that our definition for gross floor area is as simple as floor area within the perimeter of the outside walls of the building without deduction for hallways, stairs, closets, thickness of walls, columns, or other features. But we don't have any provision for calculating that gross floor area. And so at some point a few years ago, I had asked the building commissioner for him to give me a calculation, because as you know, in the watershed, if somebody wants to put on an addition within the non-disturbance zone, it can only be 50% of the total, or 25% based on the size of the principal unit. And so this is what the building commissioner provided me. It's not in the bylaw today, it just hangs on my wall, and this is his calculation, but as building commissioners change, they all have their different ways of calculating things like this. And so it's interesting to note that for garages, he counts detached, attached, and drive under.
So I have a question, and this might not be for you, maybe for him, but let's say you were converting an attached garage into an ADU. Do you use the gross floor area of that current garage
Plus the principal dwelling.
plus the principal,
Yeah.
not separate, not the principal dwelling? You use it, the whole thing?
The whole thing.
To calculate if that is allowed? Okay.
Which you can get. But in the webinar I attended, they mentioned gross floor area is not defined in the legislation, state building code has a definition. I think they're gonna use the state building code in their guidelines.
Okay,
And so
We'll wait and see.
that code also defines it, and then they also give a calculation for it. And I think it would be helpful to have the calculation in zoning, so it's consistently applied,
Okay.
no matter who's calculating it.
Okay.
And interesting, they don't count detached garages, they count attached garages as part of that calculation. So we'll have to land somewhere, but again, it doesn't have to be today.
Okay. So, if you could kind of report back to Melissa about kind of what the board's opinion, especially about
Yeah.
just in general, but also the, where we're kind of coming down with things and
So I
the
did
family
do a
suites and all that.
picture of that.
Oh, yeah.
I was referring to. I forgot I printed it.
Okay. Anybody, you said in
Yeah.
Seattle they had, ADUs?
Washington State
In Washington
has
State,
had
so
it for a while.
did you, or anecdotally, any,
No, actually, I lived in one, a
Yeah?
900 square foot, next to the big house.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was another one on property too, which was a 300 square foot.
Interesting.
ADU, which was, very small, but someone else lived there. And parking was the biggest issue with that. Utilities some were shared with the big house, and he split the bill with us, and some were separate, like the electric was separate. But it was a very efficient way. I mean, it was a small plot of land and it was
Yeah.
tight housing. But otherwise, I think the different jurisdictions work through different ways of dealing with it. But, very different home rule situation and local government structure there. But, it's one way to nip at the affordable housing issue.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So
Well,
I,
go ahead, Peter.
no, go ahead.
Just state law goes into effect February
Second.
2nd, and our bylaw, we're going to town meeting, or
So-
we're voting here on it?
Nope, so we will put forth a bylaw warrant with we will put a warrant article forward to go to town meeting.
Yeah.
At the regular town meeting.
Right.
What we've been advised is that if we notify notice the public hearing
Yeah,
before the effective date of the law,
okay,
and then adopt a bylaw that is basically in conformance with the notice, then anything built, even if its permits are pulled before town meeting, would have to comply with our law.
yeah, that's what I was getting at, that
It'll have,
window
nope,
is gonna be.
you do it at your own risk, so
Gotcha.
as long as the public's on notice of the hearing and we start
Right.
it, and we don't make, significant changes.
Right,
So that's why we're really trying to work through a good draft of the bylaw so that we don't have to make significant changes.
So, the law requires that it's not, doesn't have to be owner occupied.
If the law says we cannot require it
Correct,
to be owner
correct.
occupied.
So, and I agree with your earlier statement that this offers a lot of flexibility with affordable housing as another option. With that said, does it also create a financial incentive for institutional buyers to purchase properties in neighborhoods that are particularly suitable, that used to be a mix of owner-occupied and rental, and now they're institutional? And Is there anything that's good or bad about that? Any concerns? And is it moot because if that's the case, the market
So
will?
I think the answer is, in my opinion, the answer is yes. Well, one, it's already happening. I mean, I think Chris can tell you, there's a statistic that, 10 to 25%, I'm not sure what it is, of homes are being bought by banks and hedge funds and investors.
People come in and
developers.
use this to their
Right.
advantage.
Yeah, so the answer is,
Investors, for
will
sure.
they?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, instead of
Well,
a
But I don't know.
single
I
rental,
think
it'll be
it-
2 or 3 rentals.
They'll push it.
Yeah,
as much as
in
they
my
can.
mind, the concern that I have and that I've always had is a variant of that, and it's very similar to when there were a lot of two-family houses built in R4. And because over the last, there were a couple that were built enormously huge, out of proportion to everything else, so changed the bylaw to make it by special permit to prevent that from coming. That's my biggest fear in this, is that people will try to figure out how to game the process here. Although I think given that it's only 900 feet on top of what's already there, I think it's going to be less. I think it's going to be, and I've already said the majority of ADUs are already there, and there's no regulation at all.
I was gonna say, the other thing too is, if we allowed for more than one on a lot,
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
That would, yeah.
so I think that's why we should strongly, unless we're told otherwise, keep it as one per lot. And I think also, I do think though that not that housing, the price of building housing is very expensive, so I think it would, these are not cheap.
No.
Right, they're not necessarily cheap to build, especially, at least the attached ones.
I
The
just think
detached-
for an institutional investor, it's cheaper than it is for an individual one
Yes.
because you've
Yes.
got scale.
Yeah.
That's true, but let's say if you're just building a 900 square foot, the amount of time it would take to recoup your investment,
Yeah.
I think is still decently
Because
significant.
even if you assume like $300 a square finished, right? You're in an ADU for 270 grand without any site prep, right? So just to build it, right?
So-
With that,
The two sort of potential limiting factors are they're small, and if the 1 ADU per property holds. But I agree that if it's 2, then,
oh yeah.
Yeah, if it's two,
Yeah.
it'd be,
And
Yeah.
door
I've
would be
been,
wide open.
yeah.
Yeah.
this came up at the discussion we had at the senior center. I just don't know that there's anything we could do about that.
I think it's worth thinking about. I'm not trying to be
No, been thinking about it.
exclusionary. Yeah,
Been thinking about it. I don't
Yeah.
know. We can't restrict who owns it.
right.
We can't, restrict it to, non-corporations or things like that. Corporations have been given legal personage status under Citizens United, so they have rights. That's the state of the law. So I don't, if someone wants to come up with something, we can ask, but I have not yet heard
Yeah, okay.
anything that would,
Mostly,
it's a good question.
I just
Right.
wanted to have a discussion. And Kate, I don't want to put you on the spot, but when we started talking about this, you had like a knowing look on your face. Did you have something to share with this, or the institutional purchase of neighborhoods?
Oh, no, I mean, it's gonna, that's how our capitalist, it's gonna happen. But we'll get more housing, right?
Because there'll be more ADUs,
Right,
correct?
right. So
So,
there's
which is
incentive.
the public policy goal, it's,
It is.
Fortunately, most of the institutional buying is in the Southwest, not here. To date, there has been relatively little in
Yeah, but that just says to me that it's a vacuum to be filled, John.
Yeah. But it's a much broader issue.
But-
Yeah.
But
But they're in trouble too, the ones who bought up,
Yeah.
like the Black Rocks who bought up all the single families
Yeah.
during, when the rates were low, they're
Yeah.
shelling them back out now.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
realize
that's what
they
I
overdid
read a
it.
couple articles in the
Yeah.
journal about that
So-
there's actually a net decline.
Their
Yeah.
appetite for it may not be as,
But
heavy.
one thing that
as it was.
so I'm not sure that we can think about it. I don't know that there's anything to necessarily do with this bylaw, but I think what we should be thinking about, are there other bylaws or other things we can do to encourage single family or owner occupied housing districts? Like Gene had mentioned at some point before, there's a starter home district law the state has, right? So if we can to start talking about a district to make a starter
Well,
home district.
I mean, we
Again,
tried that twice.
I
We
know,
tried it
I know.
twice. We tried it at Meadowwood, and the houses there are going for 800,000. So it's virtually impossible, unfortunately, in this area. You know, you go put a single-family house on a 4,000 square foot lot, and it's still going to be 750,000.
John, I just want to compliment
Yeah.
you that you bring to this board a historic perspective of what the impacts were almost to first period houses.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yes,
And you look
yes.
so young.
So it's
Yeah,
not
I
easy.
know,
I don't
yeah.
know if there is a place to do it, but I think those are the things that we need to look at is other avenues of creating that opportunity for first-time home buyers,
Right,
for
right. I really like that
you know,
idea.
how you know, things to the housing trust, or if there are ways, you know,
Well,
things like
I
that.
mean, I've thought a lot about this, not going back 200 years, but, you know, it's that the only way you're going to fix the problem is on the supply side. If you try to buffer people's demand through giving them subsidies and stuff, you'll just make the problem worse.
Yeah.
If you have to get more supply at a lower price point. And ultimately, what that comes down to is building more on individual lots. I mean, I don't see how you can, in a place like North Andover, appreciably go after the issue unless you do it through multifamily condos.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't particularly enjoy saying that, but I think that's the reality of the
But I think
situation.
ADUs
Yeah,
is a
it's a viable
Is
option because-
is a marginal help
Yeah.
to that, yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
going back to the owner-occupied piece is that, and I remember listening on one of the information sessions, is that there's a scenario where you could turn your primary dwelling and the ADU into a condo and then sell the ADU.
Wow.
Yep.
But also, I mean, so yes, I agree, but also developments like the one, you know, that off air we're talking about, how they broke ground at, you know, at Second and Main, you know, those type, that's 28 units there. You know, it doesn't have, so I agree with you, supply is the way.
Yeah.
And I've been a proponent
Yeah.
of the large complexes, but they don't all have to be large complexes.
No, they don't have to be large
But-
complex, and I think that being a smaller one is a good thing, because you know the pushback has been on the
Yeah, right.
larger projects rather
So
than the smaller ones.
is there a way
Yeah.
to have some type of incentive to address either the cost with some type of subsidy or the regulatory burden to a homeowner who wants an ADU, not a family suite, an ADU, but the requirement is that the lease has to, or the title has to specify that this ADU was built using these special provisions and therefore must remain owner occupied.
That's an interesting one.
So I don't know if we can get somebody from the Affordable Housing Trust, but I think, so we couldn't do it in this bylaw, but if it's the source of the funding requiring, just like if the source of the funding is for a historical building,
Yeah.
you'd have to have a historical preservation, right? So if the source of the funding, like you're getting a loan or you're getting a grant from the Affordable Housing Trust, I think that's
I like
possible.
that.
I think
I
that's
like that
possible.
idea.
Or from elsewhere?
Yeah. Yeah, no, well, but
I don't know, I'm
yes,
just brainstorming.
I think so.
Yeah, I asked, when KP Law was there, I
Yeah.
asked if they could have an independent program
Right.
and require affordability through a deed restriction
Yeah.
outside of zoning, and she thought that was true, that you could, that we can't consider it a reasonable regulation to require affordability.
But if someone elects it,
Somebody can elect it.
okay. And do we want to?
And not necessarily affordability, someone could elect some sort of, they're a first-time home buyer
Right.
and or
Right.
owner occupied.
Right.
Yes, I think what you would have to do is figure out, or some sort of public-private partnership where you have an agency that is devoted to
Yeah,
housing people
Yeah.
and use them for grants, but
Yeah.
it could be
Like,
Jimmy Carter's thing.
Yeah.
Instead of
Habitat
building a
for
house,
Humanity.
you're gonna build an ADU. But the deal is you now have to have a deed restriction that's gonna be owner
Yeah,
occupied.
but, and you could do it not only just through grants, but could you do through a TIF?
I don't, but who would, give a
You give it essentially
tax discount?
a tax discount of the on the primary dwelling, let it carry to go to the deed restriction.
I don't know. Should we invite comment from the public?
That's
on
an
these
interesting one. I mean, I think that would be a whole other bylaw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we get comment?
You
from-
stayed the whole time, John. Do you have any thoughts?
John, do you have answers
Yeah.
to our questions?
Well,
Well, as someone who represents a lot of developers, I mean, do you have any kind of, have you been hearing things from the developer side about what they're expecting, or?
yeah, I mean,
Or the
I don't
bylaw.
think there's gonna be as much of an onslaught as some people fear.
Yeah.
You know, I think it'll be helpful. I mean, in terms of TIF, there's already, HDIP program, which only applies in gateway cities, that provides for tax increment financing, a reduction in local taxes for up to 20 years.
It
But that's
might be a
only,
It
that's
might be a
only in,
state requirement, a state
yeah,
law.
it's a state law,
Yeah.
and there's also a seasonal community designation, but we're not gonna qualify for it. So it's like the Cape Towns are gonna have sort of the same thing. And, in terms of 40Y, the starter home legislation, the draft regs are out, they're not of public comment yet, but that's 1,850 square foot dwellings with a density of no less than 4 units per acre.
Right, for the hardest part is finding somewhere to put it.
Yeah, but it's a minimum density.
Yeah.
So, but actually, I helped to draft that legislation way back when,
Yeah.
right before the change of the administration when it was passed. But the regs are out, and they're gonna. I mean, it's another tool.
Right, I mean, I think that's the key, is trying to use as many different tools as we can to try to address it, so.
But we have an administration in some circumstances where they're anti-single family. So we have to. It's production. I mean, the goal is production, rightly so in some circumstances, in terms of MBTA communities and so on. But
Yeah, I mean, well, see, I understand the state's goal for production and totally makes sense. But we've produced a lot here, so I think our goal has to be a mix of
Yeah.
production and choice. And I think that's one of the best things about the ADU law is choice, is that it gives people a different option that they don't necessarily have right now. But I think, we've definitely had a lot of projects with multifamily. I think we're gonna have more. I think they're appropriate. We've had people on different sides of how the scale of those things, and I think those are gonna be discussions we continue to have. And I think we're gonna need more because there's not much place to build, except for up. But there still is room, I think, for single-family developments, but we have to find the right place, and we have to be proactive about it, because the market's not gonna do it on its own right
so
now.
it's if you
Not
have
anymore.
first-time home buyers, it's a way to develop equity for first-time home buyers. That's a huge equity booster for first-time home buyers if you do structure program that way.
Right, and someone shared an article with me that first-time home buyers are now, the average age is 38 years old.
ridiculous.
I mean, it's hard. I mean, we don't control interest rates, so that's out of our control. Our ability to control supply and demand is limited often, as Kate said, capitalism, we have only a limited amount. But things like public partnerships and zoning are tools that we can use,
So
to try to make a difference.
this example I've given before about moving to a town when we were in the military, and it wasn't a military base, but they passed a bylaw allowing ADUs just as we were buying. That's part of the way that we afforded that house,
Good.
was because I actually had a contingency. If we did this, would it meet your bylaw? The town manager was very surprised that I was asking for that, as was the building inspector, but got it. And so we weren't first-time home buyers, but it helped us afford that house.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's a good discussion, Gene. So we're waiting for guidance. Do you think we should try to go through the bylaw at the next meeting, or wait and see? I guess when's the
There's
late?
not a whole lot of meetings left.
Yes, that's what I know.
Before noticing, I
Yeah.
think there's only 3-4 tops. And so my preference would be to bring a draft bylaw at the next meeting.
I think we should start workshopping it just to.
Yeah.
I don't want to run out of time.
We could just highlight things that we know are at risk, but at this point, I'd like to start digging a little deeper into what the bylaw will be constructed.
Yeah, we can put in things, for instance, like, okay, only one per lot, pending state guidance,
Yeah.
and things like that.
I don't want to create false hope that
Right.
people that want the strictest of strict, but
No, only things that,
We have to comply with the law, that's the end goal.
okay, no, and I mean, it will hopefully increase housing. That is the goal of it. That's a worthy goal. We just want to do it responsibly.
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. That was a great discussion, everyone. All right, can we get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 15th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anything before we adjourn? No? Okay, can you get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, approved.